So there's another project
Yes.
that you have been involved in, that you were involved in. It was a documentary,
Right.
and it was called "Thank You for Your Service."
Correct.
And I would just love to know your, I guess, your thoughts about this documentary. I watched it and was floored, and took notes and notes and notes as I'm watching it because there was so much in there.
So this documentary is related to Thank You for Your Service, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, to the EBV. It's called Thank You for Your Service.
Okay.
Originally, the documentary was supposed to be about veteran suicide prevention and what the VA was or was not doing, but it evolved in the production. I wound up acting as a technical consultant for the producers, and you know, I would say that the subject of the documentary sort of blossomed rather than changed. It became really about reintegration. It follows the story of several Marines in Fallujah who were suffered from various kinds of post-traumatic stress, including survivor's guilt and moral injury. And as it follows their story, it also offers a solution to the scourge of veteran suicide. Basically, it offers two solutions. The first is the development of within the military, a behavioral health corps, similar to, so the way the military is organized, you have different corps. So, for instance, there's a Marine Corps, and there's a dental corps, and there's a supply corps, and there's a what else? I guess a medical corps. So right now, behavioral health specialists come under something that has nothing to do with actual medical or psychological health. They
Okay.
come under some sort of administrative function. The idea is that they would separate out a behavioral health corps
Yeah.
that would provide behavioral health for veterans in combat who have experienced a trauma. So I'll give you, I talked about 3 traumas that I had experienced.
Yes.
I've actually done some research, done some publishing about this. The military actually has a protocol called battlefield traumatic event management, and it's supposed to be done, but they don't have enough people doing it. They don't have enough people know about it. So the elements are there, but they're just not being used. I liken it to police who are involved in a shooting. When a policeman is involved in a shooting, they automatically have to give up their gun and their badge. They have to go for mandatory counseling. They have to get a full bill of health before. None of that happens in the military.
Right.
If you lose a friend, if you experience any of the things that come from that are considered post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, none of that happens. So
And you even highlighted that in your book.
yes. So for me, this is all connected between
Yeah.
the EBV, the book, and the documentary.
Yes. Okay.
So the first solution that the documentary offers is behavioral health corps. The second solution that the documentary offers is a reverse boot camp, which is a boot camp to teach reintegration. And my UConn Entrepreneur Boot Camp of Veterans falls very neatly within that suggestion.
Okay.
We basically are teaching people how to reintegrate into civilian life without losing their identity, but still learning how to, find their place in civilian society. So I think we're very effective at it, very widely within our space of starting veteran businesses. We're recognized as best in class, but I think that we have developed a formula that really works for people. So the problem is scale, and actually that's what Secretary Gates in the documentary says, is how do you scale something? There are lots of programs around the country
Yeah.
that will work with 10 or 12 or 40 or 100 veterans, but there's no program in the country that can work on the scale of tens of thousands of veterans. And the scale problem it continues to be one that plagues veterans. So what happens is the whole thing is fragmented nationally. So you have veterans in different parts of the country who are able to access different services or different, support mechanisms, et cetera, than others. So veterans may have better experiences or worse experiences at reintegrating. So in Connecticut, I was very conscious when we started that we would create this sea of goodwill so that any veteran that went to any group would be able to access the whole gamut of reintegration services. It is not that way everywhere else. Which is why we have such a wide disparity in veterans reintegration outcomes. So that's how all of this ties together. The book, the EBV, and the documentary. Thank you for your service.
And I think one thing that was very staggering to me was actually hearing the numbers, such as the percentages of suicide rate.
Right.
And I think another piece too was that after 120 days, and I don't know if this has changed, I'm certainly hoping that it has, but I think as of 2014, after 120 days, those numbers really weren't looked at anymore.
Right. And so a couple of pieces to that. So number one, I in the documentary, I actually say the numbers are staggering.
Yes.
Most people, when they hear the numbers, have difficulty understanding that. And recently, there's been some controversy over the numbers are 22 a day or 20 a day. One of the things that people don't realize is that our country has about 21 million veterans. About 9 million veterans actually use the VA and are in the VA system. So a lot of people in the United States think that veterans automatically go into the VA system. That is not true. It's starting to be true now, but for decades going back, it was not true. What you had to do was, one, present yourself to the VA, and two, prove that you had service, and three, prove that you had service, and it was all on the veteran to manage. Not that any of this information went from the DOD to the Department of Veterans Affairs. So DOD would, when somebody got out, they would send information to the Department of Labor to see if they had a job or if they were getting unemployment or whatever. But they would not send the information to VA for services. So that was a real dysfunction. And there was no reason for it. And it only happened in 2015. I mean, we're 15 years into the century before DOD and VA even started talking to each other.
Do you think the numbers have changed from what was depicted in the documentary when from what I recall, 2014 was the last year that was indicated?
So, yes, no, and actually this was my train of thought. So that is only the number of veteran suicides that we know about. It is not the total number of veteran suicides, because there's more than 50% of the veteran population we don't know about. And the reporting on this on a state-by-state basis is very patchy. Right? So there's no definitive, encyclopedic source of information. The other thing that has not been captured, and this is absolutely part of the problem, is high-risk behavior deaths among veterans, particularly in the first 2 years that veterans are out of service. About as many high-risk behavior deaths as there have been suicides, but in this 1-2 year window when veterans leave service is when they are most vulnerable to the high-risk behavior that results in car accidents or drinking,
drug use,
all that kind of stuff that results in that is not counted among veteran suicides, but those numbers would probably double if we were to put it all together. Another piece that is not included, and this is the absolute truth, and I follow this somewhat on an ad hoc basis, but there's no reporting and there's no data about it from the VA, but suicides among veterans who are refused health care by the VA. But I know that there are quite a few, and they get, if you know to follow this, you'll find small blurbs or small stories about it around the country about veterans who, kill themselves in the parking lot of a VA, or in some cases self-immolate. But nobody's ever said, well, put the whole thing together nationwide and said this is how many veterans commit suicide because they're denied health care from the VA. But that's a real problem too. So we don't know. The bottom line is we know only a certain data set, but we don't know the entire data set.
We don't know the full picture.
Correct.
We know pieces.
Right.
Okay. And those pieces are alarming.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think this is where this is like a passion and almost a mission for you is to be that voice, to be the voice for veterans, to kind of continue to be a leader, and to empower others in so many ways. So something else that you've started or that you're working on.
So.
Because your tasks are just amazing and just keep coming.
Well, so all of this, in my mind, is connected.
Yes, they all are connected.
So as a result of the EVV, I wound up starting a Connecticut Veterans Chamber of Commerce, which became a legislative advocacy group for veteran-owned businesses in our state, which has been very effective in promoting veteran business ownership and making the legal environment for veterans much more conducive to starting a business. That led to an appointment by President Obama to the Advisory Committee on Veterans Business Affairs for the Small Business Administration, which advises the executive branch and the legislative branch on veterans business issues. And that led to me starting a U.S. Veterans Chamber of Commerce, which is a number of nonprofits under one umbrella that advocates for veteran business ownership. It does certification of veteran-owned businesses. It provides services to, we have what we're calling 5 pillars of value-added programs. So business, employment, education, family, and wellness. That we provide to veterans to help them reintegrate, create a holistic reintegration plan for veterans once they get to their community, wherever they're going to be.
Fantastic.
And we've developed a portfolio of veterans events nationwide that we sponsor. So this includes the Wounded Warrior Games, the Invictus Games, the Vets Rock Benefit Concert, the GI Film Festival, the New York City Veterans Parade, the Fleet Week. Fleet Weeks happen in several cities around the country. So we sponsor the Fleet Weeks. So, and this is an idea whose time has come. There are veterans chambers popping up all around the country, but they're not connected or to anything larger. So we're creating a larger umbrella organization that can collect all these and harness the energy that is in this market space, in this demographic, to create. And here's why. So overall, I mentioned 21 million veterans in our country. But by 2030, that number is going to go down to about 14 million. So about 7 million, about 33% of the current veterans population is going to what I call pass into history. It's the World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Right now, Vietnam veterans are leaving the workforce, but Korea and World War II are, departing into history. So, at the same time that the veterans population is shrinking, it's also shrinking as a percentage of the overall population of the country, which is growing. So, it's both shrinking in real terms and in relative terms. So, we are losing political, economic, and social capital as a result. And that is when you start seeing veterans benefits being cut. So I found a quote, and this is what inspired me. This is what my North Star, my guide star has been. A quote from General George Washington to the first governor of Connecticut, Jonathan Trumbull, in 1781 at the end of the Revolutionary War, when they were discussing what are we going to do with these veterans. And General Washington wrote, "Permit me, sir, to add that present policy is to satisfy every demand, however reasonably made, by those veteran troops who have so long and so faithfully served the states in the recent conflict. And for me, that is a very present and very direct statement of intent from the first Commander-in-Chief. And I think it is as applicable now in the 21st century as it was in 1781. So that is what our intent is with the U.S. Veterans Chamber of Commerce. And really, that is the unifying theme among all these things that I'm doing. Right? That is what it drives me. That's the animus that drives me in all of these things.
And that's how they're all connected.
Right.
And that's how it ties into all, the passion that you
Yes.
have and the drive.
Right. I work anywhere from 18 to 20 hours a day. It's, for people who know me, who work with me, it's not unusual to get emails from me between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. And then I get up at 6:30, 7 o'clock. So I'm, at this point, 13 years out of Iraq, I'm used to 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. That's basically what I do. And everything else is this work.
This amazing work
Thank
that you were doing for so many, and bringing light to important topics, bringing knowledge and actually action, creating.
So again, a lot of people don't realize this because a lot of people are not connected to military veterans, but when somebody enlists in the military, they swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and they enter into this office freely without any purpose of evasion or mental reservation. So the really important part there is that they take this obligation freely, which is the foundation of an all-volunteer force, right? So they're freely entering into a very specific relationship with the federal government to support and defend the Constitution. So we need to make sure that the federal government fulfills its end of the both legal and moral and social contract that it has with the veteran. And there are certainly times when people will admit that that has not always been so. And the threat, I think, is a loss of population, where it becomes easy for politicians to say, well, I don't have as many veterans now, so I will have other priorities, and I will put my energy and effort into other things. And I don't think that's right.
And I think you've also been involved in, if you didn't touch on it already, I think you've also been involved in legislative,
Yes.
Whether changes or trying to implement more education.
A little bit of both. So among the legislative initiatives we've had where we've been successful, we were able to get the legislature passed and the governor signed, not a requirement but an encouragement for schools to remain open on Veterans Day, and gives a mark of distinction to schools that have a Veterans Day curriculum. Not all schools do, but the schools that do get are recognized for that.
I am going to say my son's school is open and does a amazing ceremony. My husband is a veteran, and my father-in-law is a veteran, and they went that day in their uniforms, as many other veterans did, and there was an outcrying support, and I want to say honor towards them. So it was a beautiful thing to see, and I really, hope that all schools do that, because to me that day is not a day off.
I agree, and I've been speaking a lot about this, but part of what I say is that Veterans Day is not a holiday. It's a different kind of day. It's a day that's fraught with emotion.
Right.
Our country has been at war now since 2001. We're going on 16 years at war, an entire generation that has not known peace. And we really need to think about what that means. I think that Veterans Day is a day where we as a nation can have a discussion about what does it mean to have an entire generation that's been at war? What does it mean to have, so few actually fighting the war for so many without any shared sacrifices? And I really think that that's the opportunity for that conversation.
Just to kind of look at wrapping up our time today, is there anything that you feel that maybe we have not mentioned regarding the documentary, which I do want to put up, I will put up the suicide prevention hotline.
Oh, right.
Because of the fact that we know that the suicide rate is very high. We want people to be able to access that when they need to, that people really need to get themselves into the VA, at least still right now if they are a veteran, because right now it's not automatically happening, I think is important info. And anything else that you feel is important that maybe we did not go over regarding the book, the documentary, everything that you're doing?
There's one other project that we have not mentioned.
Awesome.
I consulted on a movie called Man Down. It came out December of 2016.
Okay.
It starred Shia LaBeouf and Gary Oldman. Shia LaBeouf was a Marine serving in Afghanistan who experienced a traumatic event in theater and diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and it depicts him going to the combat stress clinic in Afghanistan in theater, then coming back and not getting treatment for post-traumatic stress with tragic consequences.
Okay.
And a lot of the things that are in that movie are things that come from me. I think it's the best cinematic depiction of what post-traumatic stress is like in film history.
Okay.
I think that Shia LaBeouf's performance ranks with, for instance, some of the other Vietnam post-traumatic stress movies like The Deer Hunter or Apocalypse Now. The movie itself was critically panned, unfortunately. It made very little money.
Okay.
But when we've shown it to veterans, they have gotten it immediately. They understand it completely. I might have done too good a job at depicting what post-traumatic stress is like, because you can't really expect a general audience to get it.
Okay.
But that is part of the whole thing that I'm doing, and possibly in striving to be as accurate as possible. In a movie like that, it may have alienated a wider general audience.
Okay.
Unfortunately, but I definitely recommend it for people who are interested in post-traumatic stress, etc. I thought it was a great movie personally, but.
And what was the name of it again?
Man Down.
Man Down.
With Shia LaBeouf. Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and telling us about your journey and all that you're doing for veterans.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and thank you as well, Dina.
Take care. Thank you. And we're going to have slides up to give you all the information that you may need. And if you remember, Mike Zacchea absolutely said reach out to him. If you are a veteran and you're wondering about the EBV program, if you're wondering about services, he is someone that is always there. As you hear, he sleeps 3 hours a night. So wish you all well, and thank you for joining us.